Hollywood's hair transplants, the icons, the illusions, and the insecurities they tried to hide. We tend to remember Hollywood's golden age legends as paragons of elegance, men whose looks were as effortless as their charisma, whose hairlines seemed sculpted as much as styled. But the truth is far more complicated, and in many cases, far more revealing. In a time when aging gracefully was not yet fashionable, and cosmetic procedures were more experimental than effective, some of Hollywood's most admired leading men turned to early hair transplant surgery. Not out of vanity alone, but out of the immense pressure to maintain an image that millions expected to remain unchanged. And yet here lies the contradiction. In trying to preserve their youth, they inadvertently made themselves look more artificial, less human even, than time ever could. The procedures, crude by today's standards, often left visible scars, unnatural patterns, and a strange disconnect between face and hair, as if their scalps were dressed in someone else's story. This wasn't just a cosmetic misstep. For many of these actors, it became a lifelong burden, one hidden behind studio lighting, clever styling, and carefully composed press shots. And in some cases, it quietly eroded the very confidence they had once projected so effortlessly on screen. In this feature, we revisit 12 well-known figures, from Golden Age icons like Frank Sinatra and Marlon Brando, to later stars like John Travolta and Mel Gibson, whose hair transplant journeys offer a poignant look at celebrity, insecurity, and the costs of chasing an ideal. Let's begin, not with judgment, but with a deeper look at what happens when fame, aging, and flawed technology collide. 1. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the Bad Hair Board. Frank Sinatra was a symbol of cool, but even he couldn't escape the anxiety of hair loss. In the 1960s, he underwent one of the earliest forms of hair transplantation, a process called punch grafting. The technique left his scalp looking patchy, with thick, doll-like clumps of hair set in unnatural rows. Under bright lights and TV cameras, the imperfections were hard to hide. During one TV special, sweat exposed the harsh lines of his grafts. The result wasn't just cosmetic awkwardness, it chipped away at the image of effortlessness Sinatra cultivated. He didn't need the transplant. Sinatra's appeal was his voice and confidence, but in chasing a youthful image, he became one of the earliest examples of how modern procedures, done too soon, could backfire. And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. 2. Bert Reynolds, the Bandit's Patchy Ride. Bert Reynolds was a poster child of 70s masculinity, but off-camera, he wrestled with his hair loss. He underwent multiple transplants, and the results were mixed at best. His hairline was too straight, too thick, and often looked pasted onto his forehead. Each additional surgery tried to fix the last, but instead of resolution, it led to more visible scarring and inconsistent hair patterns. In time, Reynolds admitted he regretted the procedures. His persona didn't require perfection, but Hollywood's expectations told him otherwise. 3. Sammy Davis Jr., Showbiz Shine, Surgical Shadows. Sammy Davis Jr. brought boundless energy to every stage, but he was no stranger to insecurity. As his hair began to thin in the late 60s, he opted for a transplant that placed dense plugs along his front hairline. The result was a visible strip of thick hair that clashed with the more natural recession elsewhere. Though he tried to cover it with styling and pomade, the contrast remained stark, especially under harsh studio lights. It was a reminder that even the most confident performers can carry silent insecurities. 4. William Shatner, Star Trek's Surgical Trek. As Captain Kirk, William Shatner embodied adventure and command. But behind the scenes, he worried about his thinning hair. Like others, he turned to plug grafting. The results were clear on camera. An unnaturally firm hairline, frozen in place while the rest of him aged. Ironically, Shatner's self-awareness helped redeem the situation. Rather than deny or hide it, he often joked about his hair, showing a kind of charm in acknowledging what others tried to bury. 5. Tony Curtis, sculpting the illusion. Tony Curtis, matinee idol of the 50s and 60s, was known for his jet black mane. When that began to fade, he pursued aggressive transplant surgeries. But the results left his scalp with telltale plug marks, stiff rows and columns that looked like planted crops. As Curtis aged, the contrast between the transplant and his natural graying hair became pronounced. Instead of aging gracefully, his look became one of forced youth, denying the maturity that could have deepened his roles. 7. John Travolta, from Saturday Night Fever to surgical follicles. Travolta's hair was once a symbol of disco cool, but as his natural hairline faded, his surgically enhanced one took center stage, and not in a good way. The results were overly uniform, lacking the softness and recession of natural hair. Critics and audiences alike found it jarring. It wasn't until Travolta shaved his head in later years that he reclaimed his look, embracing the change rather than fighting it. And in doing so, he appeared more confident than he had in decades. 8. Elton John, glitter, glamour, and grafts. Elton John was among the earliest rock stars to try hair transplants. His surgeries left behind inconsistent clumps and scarring, which he later covered with hats and wigs. But instead of hiding, he leaned into the artifice. Today, Elton's wigs are part of his iconic look, not a cover-up, but a celebration of theatrical identity. His story proves that embracing the artificial can sometimes feel more authentic than pretending to be natural. 9. Sha Connory, Bond's brief battle. Sha Connory began balding during his Bond years but experimented briefly with transplants before switching to wigs. The surgical results were disappointing, but Connory ultimately embraced baldness, and his career never suffered. He became a symbol of aging with strength and dignity. Connory's decision to move past the illusion and accept change showed how maturity can enhance a legacy, not diminish it. 10. Marlon Brando, the method actor's mask. Brando's intense performances redefined acting, but off-screen, he was deeply private, especially about his appearance. Multiple failed transplants left him dependent on wigs and hats, a reality hidden from the public for years. Rather than enhance his image, the procedures became part of the guarded persona he carried into later life. His case reflects a painful irony. A man known for emotional honesty became trapped by the false promise of cosmetic truth. 11. Anthony Perkins, psychoanalyzing the follicles. Anthony Perkins's delicate beauty was part of his allure. As he aged, subtle hair loss changed that image. He underwent transplant procedures that resulted in mismatched density and direction, making his hair look styled by a compass, not nature. Perkins, always introverted, became even more reclusive. While we can't know how much his appearance affected his retreat from the spotlight, the evidence suggests the surgeries didn't help him feel more secure, perhaps just more hidden. 12. James Franciscus, a cautionary tale in plain sight. Once a clean-cut star of 60s TV, James Franciscus faded from public memory, and part of the reason may lie in the failed transplants he received. As his career declined, his rigid hairline and visible scarring became harder to ignore. Without the fame to reframe the narrative, Franciscus became a quiet casualty of cosmetic overreach, a reminder that even well-intentioned interventions can trap someone in a version of themselves that no longer works. Closing thoughts. The real cost of reinvention. These 12 stories reveal more than just outdated cosmetic science. They expose a deeper tension between who these stars were and who the world demanded them to be. Hair loss wasn't just a cosmetic issue, it was a career risk, a psychological burden, and in some cases, a lifelong regret. Trying to maintain an illusion, many sacrificed something more vital, the freedom to evolve. Authenticity, as it turns out, tends to age more gracefully than perfection ever could. In an age of Ultra HD cameras and digital scrutiny, perhaps it's worth remembering that the faces and stories we connect with most are not the flawless ones, but the human ones. If you found this exploration compelling, consider subscribing for more behind-the-scenes dives into film history, celebrity culture, and the untold human stories behind the spotlight.